Nick Pitts.
And good morning. This is Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts on this November 27th, 2017 day, also known as Cyber Monday, the Monday of all Mondays, because we're coming out of the Thanksgiving weekend. I am Nick Pitts here in Dallas. It's been a long time. I haven't heard from you all. Haven't been here in the Dallas area for quite a while. I've been was in Israel for the past 2 weeks, and then spent some time back in Tennessee with family over the Thanksgiving holiday, and so good to be back in the chair. And there is so much going on in the news today, and cannot wait to kind of discuss some of this with you. So if you want to call in at any time, that number is 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Today we're going to be talking about everything from Nancy Pelosi's interview with Chuck Todd yesterday on Meet the Press and kind of her defense or lack thereof of John Conyers. We'll also be talking about what's happening at the University of Tennessee. They're backing out of their signed agreement with Greg Schiano. And what is it? What is this Me Too thing that continues to sweep across the country? Is it coming to an end anytime soon? Are we empowering women? Are we victimizing men? What's going on with that? We'll also be talking about the latest tragedy in Egypt as well that happened on Friday afternoon for us, the bombing that happened, as well as the latest on tax reform. And then finally, we'll end with millennials and entitled in the workplace. Is there a sense of entitlement in the workplace among millennials? And as a millennial myself, I'll be very anxious to hear from you all relative to that. So again, you can call in. That number is 800-351-1212. We'll be taking your phone calls all morning. And so let's jump into it. We came out of the weekend, and it was just a crazy weekend for you football fans. We had everything from Alabama losing to Auburn, to Miami falling, to now we're seeing the rise of Auburn in the polls. And we don't know what's happening in football, but the football not only happening on the field is a little crazy, but also what's happening off the field as well. The University of Tennessee fired their football coach a few days ago, Butch Jones, after a few seasons of not meeting expectations. And now, before they even hired their new coach, it already looks as though they're having to figure out a buyout clause with the new coach as well. So coming out of reports yesterday, was very quickly developing. Tennessee backed out of a memorandum of understanding with Ohio State defensive coordinator Greg Schiano to be the Volunteers' next football coach, according to ESPN's Chris Lowe. The memorandum of understanding was signed by both parties Sunday in Columbus, Ohio. Tennessee planned to introduce Schiano at a news conference on Sunday night. Well, Schiano probably sounds very familiar to many of you because he was named during the Penn State debacle when it came to the Jerry Sandusky, just the despicable acts by Sandusky. There was a public outcry among Tennessee fans, with everyone from Diane Black, who's running for governor of Tennessee, who's a sitting representative in Middle Tennessee, to local state representatives as well, offering up their cause for concern about bringing in someone of such behavior. But what does this all stem from? Well, this all stems from a conversation, kind of a deposition, an interview that was published around that time in the Washington Post. In the Washington Post, there was an individual that called out Schiano as he heard that Schiano had heard or walked in on some of Sandusky's despicable acts. So it's not just a hearsay kind of thing. It's almost 3 degrees of separation that Schiano was indicted in on this. But one of the interesting things that happens was this happened years ago, but just as his mere presence in this whole situation through hearsay has caused ripple effects up to 2017, to the extent that they were going to roll out in a press conference later on that night, introduce him to Tennessee fans as the next head football coach. Well, Tennessee erupts. Tennessee fan base, Ball Nation erupts as we continue to see the ripple effects of this debacle that's happening. But this leads to the question for me. So allegations can keep you from being a college football coach, but you can still be a U.S. senator, right? Because this still sounds very similar to what's happening with some of the roil up right now relative to Roy Moore. Roy Moore, as reported by the Washington Post almost a month ago, was accused of having relations with a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, and then an 18-year-old. There was reports that came out that around that time that Moore was known to have relationships with high schoolers during his early 30s before he was married. This was an individual that was utilizing his position of power, and there's to such an extent that we found out that he was even picking up girls, not only at the local high school and calling them out of class, but there's also accusations that that he was picking up the 14-year-old in particular right outside the courthouse. Now, again, these are just accusations, allegations. But allegations are the very thing that caused Schiano to lose his job that he didn't even have. He had a job less for a shorter amount of time than Anthony Scaramucci. But nevertheless, Schiano is now going to be out before he's actually in with the University of Tennessee. But yet Roy Moore continues to move forward. It's fascinating to see this moving onward about how there really is no safe places anymore, and there is just this vigilante justice that's happening. There's, to an extent, that there is significance here. There's weight here to this, because a lot of this, there's truth to it. And look no further than the truth to what's happening in the House of Representatives right now. Everyone, so coming on yesterday on Meet the Press, not Speaker Pelosi, but Minority Leader Pelosi went on Meet the Press, and as the leading Democratic woman in Congress, Pelosi has been overwhelmingly supportive of women who say they're victims of sexual harassment. She herself is the very first female Speaker of the House. But Speaker Pelosi is having to deal with some blowback as well from John Conyers. John Conyers is one of the older representatives out of Michigan that it was reported that has paid out silence money from settlement money, rather, from sexual accusations that happened years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, totaling upwards of $25,000 to $30,000. Now, who's paying this money? That's us, the taxpayers. The taxpayers are footing this bill for some of the lewd acts that Conyers, I guess, purportedly or accusedly has done. So when Pelosi went on Meet the Press and Chuck Todd asked her, quote, NBC pressed Pelosi, and she said, "You said there's zero tolerance for John Conyers. What does that mean right now? Is he in or is he out?" And Pelosi responds, "We're strengthened by due process. Just because someone is accused, was it one accusation? Is it two? John Conyers is an icon in our country. He's done a great deal to protect women." Then she moves on further, and as Todd continues to press her as to a response, she says, quote, "I don't know who they are. Do you? They've not really come forward." She adding that it's time for the House Ethics Committee to decide whether or not the accusations are credible. The accusations were credible to the extent that the U.S. taxpayer had to pay $25,000 to $30,000, so there is some credibility to it because my money's behind it, right? But nevertheless, we continue to find ourselves, whether you're on the right or whether you're on the left, understanding that sexual harassment and sexual misconduct knows no party line, and that both sides of it are going to continue, it seems as though, are going to continue to be rolled out as we continue to move forward into this holiday season. So what are we to think about this? How are we to respond? Well, I'd love to hear your responses, and so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And when we come back, we'll continue to talk about Nancy Pelosi's response to John Conyers on her interview with Meet the Press and what appears to be just a very supportive and enabling such despicable behavior. To then Al Franken is coming back to the Senate, and he'll be back today when the Senate is in session as they're debating the tax reform bill. And again, we'd love to hear from you, so you be sure to call in, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
The tax bill making its way through Congress may be a slight improvement over the existing tax code, but just barely. Columnist George Will reminds us that the best solution would be to repeal and replace the tax code. There is a bill in Congress that would actually do that, but it won't ever get an up or down vote. The Tax Code Termination Act would delete the 4 million word code as of December 31st, 2021, and require that Congress replace it with a new one by July 4th of that year. George Will says that it could just as easily be called the Mitch Daniels Act. Daniels was the head of Office of Management and Budget who wished the tax code looked as though it had been designed on purpose. One statement by George Will in his column got my attention. He says that 62% of American households pay more in payroll taxes than in income taxes. He also added that 45% of American households pay no income tax. That's when I decided to dig into the numbers provided by the Tax Policy Center. Nearly 36% pay more in payroll taxes than income taxes, and an additional 26% pay no income taxes but do pay payroll taxes for a total of 62%, cited by George Will. When you add the 18% who pay neither income taxes nor payroll taxes to the 26% who pay payroll taxes but no income taxes, you get the total of 45% of American households who pay no income tax. The tax reform bill would double the standard deduction to $12,000 for individuals and $24,000 for married couples. This change will increase the number of people who will not have to pay any income taxes. That will make it even harder to get tax simplification because fewer Americans will be affected by the tax code. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View on this November 27, 2017 day. I am Nick Pitts, back in the chair on this Monday morning, and we have been talking about everything from the John Conyers defense by Nancy Pelosi on Meet the Press to what's happened out of the University of Tennessee with Greg Schiano being hired but not hired, and then coming back and forth and what's happening there. So then what we continue to see is just a perpetual theme, it seems as though, the sexual misconduct that's happening all across our land. And you can be sure to, we'd love to hear from you as your comments. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. We're going to continue talking about this today, as well as we'll be talking about what's happening in Egypt right now with the ISIS attack. It seems as though on this kind of mysticism form of Islam. And we'll kind of move more into that, as well as we'll be talking about the U.S. relationship with Turkey that's changing and the latest on tax reform. But it's a Cyber Monday, and so we came out of the weekend, and it was what was known as Black Friday after Thanksgiving Thursday. And what was fascinating is that 42% of Black Friday sales came from mobile phones. The average Black Friday user spent $122 per Salesforce, but Adobe has the number at $135. It's fascinating how mobile technology is continuing just to dominate our lives, as well as we're continuing to see it play a huge part in the sexual misconduct and sexual harassment claims as well. And so giving a plug for what's happening today is Cyber Monday. But as we move through this week, it seems as though there's going to be thematic days that move forward and continue to characterize each day. But I want to remind you that tomorrow is going to be Giving Tuesday. And on Giving Tuesday, it's the opportunity to not only to give gifts as 'tis the season, the holiday season of cheer, but also to give to organizations that are helping, that are nonprofit organizations that are really helping out the communities in the world. And we would highly encourage you to be able to help us by giving back to Point of View. What we try to do at Point of View is defend faith, freedom, and the family. But one of the things that we do, and one of the ways that we do that, is to be able to speak to the cultural issues of the day, to help thoughtfully consider some of these issues and do so from a distinctively biblical perspective. And so each day on Monday mornings, we do it once, and then on Monday afternoon and through Friday afternoon, we come to you for 2 hours every day and try to dissect the news for you. And in a fake news world, it's going to be increasingly important for you to know who to trust, and we hope and we're so grateful that you trust us with that as well. And so you can give to Point of View, and you can go to the website at www.pointofview.net, or for other millennials out there like myself, you can go to www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio, where you can find us on there. And so I've been told that I have a face for radio, which unfortunately, for those of you who are on Facebook right now, you can see me on our Facebook page. And so you can go to www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio to be able to see a live cast, Facebook Live, of what's happening today as well. And so we're going to continue in the news, and what's continues to be happening is, unfortunately, we're just continuing to see that women are being abused, and we're coming out of the shadows. And so there's goodness that's happening in that, and that we're calling out the despicable behavior of individuals. But there's also the sadness that so many women have been so quiet relative to this. And what we're continuing to see is that this knows no party bounds and no party lines as well. As we were talking about yesterday, as we were talking about what happened yesterday with Nancy Pelosi defending John Conyers, or really not being very defensive of him, but really almost enabling him on her interview on Meet the Press. When asked in an interview with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press whether Conyers should step aside, the California Democrat instead praised the longtime Michigan lawmaker, citing his work on the Violence Against Women Act and as an example of his respect for women. And then when pressed as to whether he should resign even more, Pelosi said, quote, "We're strengthened by due process. Just because someone is accused, was it one accusation, was it two?" Then she transitions and says, quote, "John Conyers is an icon in our country. He's done a great deal to protect women." Close quote. Yes, he might have protected women, and there might be accusations that are leveled against him, but I would hope that some of those accusations, if the taxpayers have put money out there to be able to silence some of these accusers to this extent of 25 to 30,000, that shows that there's validity to some of the accusations. Is that not true? And if there's validity to some of these accusations, then there needs to come to light, and there needs to be repercussions for some of these accusations. It only makes sense in this time in which we're calling individuals to step aside because of some of their misdeeds towards women. We're lauding these individuals as examples, not only for our children, but also for us as well, being worthy of emulation. And what type of man? We don't want these type of men to be examples that mistreat women, that denigrate women. They need to step aside. And John Conyers isn't alone. There's other individuals that have continued, that have been accused, but also not only have the accusations been founded to be true, but also we continue to hear there's not just one accusation either. Another individual on the other side of the House, on the other side of the Congress, is individuals, Senator Al Franken of Minnesota. Senator Al Franken, in an op-ed in the Minnesota Star Tribune, said he is embarrassed and ashamed in an op-ed yesterday. He went on and said, quote, "I've let a lot of people down, and I'm hoping I can make it up to them and gradually begin to regain their trust." Yes, he can gradually begin to regain our trust, but can he do so from a position of power in which taxpayers are funding his salary, or does he need to step aside? We'd love to hear from you. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. What happened with Franken started with just a radio or television anchor, Leanne Tweeden, based upon some reports that happened years ago, that she finally has spoken out against him. And when she speaks out, she enables and strengthens other individuals to speak out. And the accusations continue to roil about him, but yet he continues to stay in his seat. Should he stay there? Should he go? And then there is Roy Moore. Moore is the senatorial candidate for out of Alabama right now. And what happened probably about a month ago is the Washington Post began listening to and started reporting on some of the accusations against him about his preying upon and his relationships with a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old. And more women are coming out, as well as a characteristic of him in the Gadsden, Alabama area during his time as a 30-something district attorney. And what we're continuing to see is that there's just this picture of Moore that is very sketchy by its very nature. But Roy Moore continues to be emboldened. He continues to be supported by individuals within the Republican Party leadership, to the extent that now he still continues to lead in the polls. This man that is an accused child, a pedophile to a certain degree, is still leading in the polls in Alabama right now. And that places you, if you are in Alabama, with quite a array of choices right now. You can, one, either support Roy Moore and vote for him, knowing these accusations appear to be true. Two, you can vote against Roy Moore and vote for Doug Jones, who's the Democrat, who has been openly openly loud is probably the best word to use about his willingness to support abortion until the child is birthed out of its mother womb. So supporting abortion not just past 20 weeks, but up until birth. Do you support him because you disdain Roy Moore's tactics? Do you vote third party, or 4, do you just decide that you're not going to vote at all and continue to enable such behavior? If you're a millennial like myself, there's many millennials out there that have decided not to vote. They're very quick to protest, and they're very quick to share their opinion on Facebook or on social media relative to what they think about the situation, but they're very slow to actually go to the voter's box. When we looked at the 2016 polling numbers, it appeared as though only 1 in 4 millennials voted. That number is staggeringly low, considering that this is the largest generation that can vote in the electorate today, and that 1 in 4 millennials are voting. What's even more staggering is the fact that there's a record low number of millennials that are actually registered to vote. Registering to vote is as easy as signing up for a Facebook page. Facebook, 90% of millennials have signed up for a Facebook, but only 55% have registered to vote. When you compare that to other generations, that number is around 74 to 80% of other generations are registered to vote. But millennials, for example, are very quick to be able to sign up for a Facebook page, very quick to be able to protest, but very slow to actually utilize the very medium by which they can bring about the change that they so desire and need. And so what are you going to do? What is your thoughts on Roy Moore? What are your thoughts on John Conyers? Should Nancy Pelosi have spoke up something a little bit stronger, especially considering she's the first female Speaker of the House to be elected by her peers? We'd love to hear from you. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. When we get back, we're going to continue to talk about some of what's happening in D.C., as well as with some of the tragedy that continues to spill out, especially in Egypt right now, as they're still suffering from a bombing that went off at a mosque, killing upwards of 305 people. And when we get back, we'll talk about that, as well as what's happening in Washington, and we'll talk a little bit about tax reform as well. And we'll be back right after this.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday, there's no end to the ways people are enticing you to spend money. But in the spirit of giving, a reminder that tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. The idea is that amidst the rush to consume, we'll also remember to invest in things that matter. And for Point of View, in line with 2-for-1 specials and BOGO, buy one, get one, we invite you to step up and duet. D-O-E-T. What is that? Donate 1 equals 2. You donate $1 to Point of View Radio, and through a special deal with one of our friends, your dollar becomes 2, your $20 becomes 40, your 50 becomes 100, your 1,000 becomes 2,000. So just duet. Donate 1, which equals 2. And our doors are open now. Click the banner at pointofview.net. Or call 1-800-347-5151. Or mail your donation before the clock strikes 12 Tuesday night. Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Pointofview.net. Just do it. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back on Point of View on this November 27th, 2017 day. This is Cyber Monday and the thematic week of the days after Thanksgiving leading up to the Christmas holiday season in this 2017 season. I'm just so excited that I can finally legitimately listen to Christmas music and not be judged by my friends whatsoever. There's just something about listening to Michael Bublé right now that just welcomes us into the season. And I'm getting a look right now that why would I listen to Michael Bublé for Christmas? I mean, I don't know what else I would listen to for Christmas. Do I listen to Mariah Carey? All I Want for Christmas? No, maybe not. Okay. I'll just continue to listen to Third Day's Christmas music or Mercy Me. Mercy Me has this older Christmas album that I think is just top notch. Their take on the Little Drummer Boy is just phenomenal. But nevertheless, speaking of Little Drummer Boy, no, there's no way to transition out of Little Drummer Boy. We've been talking about what's happening in D.C. right now relative to some of the sexual misconduct and accusations that continue to be leveled. And it really knows no political party, which is just so troubling, not only for women, but also disheartening for men as well that are trying to be upstanding leaders, not only in their behavior, but also in their policies as well. And we continue to see that now we're seeing supportive and enabling behavior by the leadership of both parties. What we've always known it to be true, just leading up to this, is really it knows no, again, like we said, knows no political party bounds. We've had everyone from Al Franken on the left-hand side to what's now happening with Roy Moore on the right that's just continuing to be embroiled in some of this scandal. Senator Al Franken of Minnesota is joining the Senate yet again this morning, emerging from the cave that he has been in for the past week, some might argue. And he's saying that he's going to get back to Washington to, quote, try to really gradually regain the trust of the people that brought him there. And so as he's making his way to Washington, working through the tax reform bill and trying to move past some of these allegations, we've got individuals like Roy Moore that's been using some of the accusations that have been leveled against him relative to the 14-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 17-year-old, the 18-year-old, that have put these accusations against him, and the 30 people that have buttressed and edified some of these accusations. And he continues to move forward. He's up a mere 4 points in the latest poll. An accused pedophilia individual is up 4 points in Alabama right now, making his way to what could potentially be the Senate. And we're left thinking, well, is there an individual that is upstanding? Is there an individual that what the biblical narrative would say is above reproach? I thought what was a particularly insightful comment was by Michael Gerson when he was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd during the panel portion, the latter part of the program yesterday. And Michael Gerson, who is the former Bush 43 speechwriter, I think correctly identified our present predicament when he said we not only have tribal politics, but we have a tribal morality as well. This tribal morality is almost a take on this great man theory. And this great man theory is it's in essence, it rationalizes away bad behavior and bad actions because the great man is irreplaceable and is required for the movement. What I find so intriguing about this is that we typically, it's a form of the confirmation bias where we have certain confirmations, and that whenever there's something that contradicts what it is that we hold and believe to be true, we rationalize it away to such an extent because we believe it to be true. We hold so deeply to that confirmed idea, that confirmed understanding. So, for example, if someone was to talk bad about my mother, I've got a confirmation bias against her that holds her in very high regard. And so I rationalize it away by discrediting the individual or discrediting or poking a hole through the allegation, trying to rationalize it away. But to the extent that we have this great man theory, it not only rationalizes it away, but it also, there's the understanding that this person is contingent upon the progress of the movement going forward. And so not only are we willing to rationalize whether it is John Conyers' allegations and accusations that have been leveled against him or Roy Moore, we're not only willing to rationalize it away by discrediting these women or discrediting some of these lawsuits, but we're moving forward by saying by putting them in the place of the movement, by saying they are essential, they are necessary to see this movement move forward. How are we doing it with Conyers? Conyers, we're saying that he is a tried and true institution, right? Nancy Pelosi went on Meet the Press earlier on Sunday, and what she said is he's been a great protector of women. He's an icon of the institution. Well, if he's such an icon of the institution, is this something that we want to be associated with the institution, right? Some of these accusations that have been leveled against him, to the extent that the taxpayer was willing to fund $25,000 to $30,000 to be able to silence these women in a settlement. There's validity to that as well. So we have John Conyers on the left-hand side, but then on the right-hand side, we have Roy Moore. Roy Moore, not only are we willing to discredit some of the accusations that have been leveled against him, but we're also buttressing our argument by saying that we don't want Doug Jones in that seat. Because remember how adamant of supporter Doug Jones is to abortion, right? So we're saying that contingent upon Roy Moore, we're willing to swallow and rationalize some of the accusations away from Roy Moore to the extent that we're so fearful of what Doug Jones could do. And it's this great man understanding. So how are we to think about this from the biblical perspective? How can we think about this from the scripture, which it says in Psalm 119, is a light to our feet and a guide to our path, that's illuminating our way? Well, I think it's very clear in scripture of what it says in Proverbs 14:34, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin condemns any people. That righteousness is the tide in which causes all boats to rise. And as we rise, we need to be cognizant of is it doesn't immune us to critique, right? Just because I support someone, it doesn't make it. Just because I support someone, just because I love someone, doesn't mean I can't critique that person. My mom and my dad remind me of this very often, right? That sometimes the most loving word that you can give is a harsh word because you're willing to endure temporary discomfort for long-term health. That you saw your children playing in the street and you're willing to yell at them in that moment because you recognize it to be true that if they continue to play in the street, they might not be able to play for the next day because it might detrimentally hurt their future and their ability to play into the future. So you're willing to cause temporary discomfort through the yelling in order that they might continue to play, but just do so not in the street. What are we to do? What are we to think about this? What we need to continue to see is we can voice our critique against these individuals. We can voice our critique against these people that are part of our parties, but we need to do so because we love them, because we see they're moving in such a direction that is very unfortunate, that's very tragic, that's very detrimental to the very foundations of our country, right? Wasn't it George Washington that said that religion and morality would be the very foundations, the pillars upon which this democracy would stand? That it was John Adams that would say that we have a democracy that's unsuitable for immoral people. That the reason why Thomas Jefferson argued for a separation between the church and the state in 1801 to his letter to the Danbury Baptists wasn't to keep the church out of the state, but rather was to keep the state out of the church. He recognized the value of religious principles. He was one of the foremost proponents of religious liberty because he saw the need of religious people that produced virtue, and virtue was a good ally of a limited government. This wasn't to keep religion out of the state, but rather was to bring religious people into the circles and spheres in order that they might be the tide that causes all boats to rise. What are we to think about? So with Roy Moore, with Conyers, we need to be individuals that are willing to love our country, willing to love our party, willing to support particular candidates, but do so in an extent that we're willing to offer the harsh word. Because isn't it true that faithful are the wounds of a friend? That we need to be able to offer these harsh words in order that we might be able to direct this country towards a more profitable position, not continuing to enable such behavior to move forward. Or not only do we not enable this behavior to move forward, but we continue to not want to do anything to try to silence the women that have yet to speak up. One of the critiques that has been offered, one of the common refrains that we hear is that women, the reason why they don't speak up is they feel as though they'll be discredited or harmed because of in their professional careers or in their personal lives because of their accusations, because of them speaking up. Well, what does this say to them when we're willing to believe these individuals that have done nothing to support or done nothing to combat some of these accusations? What does it say to the women that have silently decided to stand on the sidelines to see how these other brave women have spoken out against these men that have perpetrated such wrongs against them? What we want to do is we want to support these women. We want We want to find and see if these allegations are true, that these women have been harmed in any which way, in order that other women might be able to see how they're supported and how this behavior is reprehensible, and we want to eradicate this behavior from the public square, because we believe it to be true that we're a virtuous nation, that we're a good nation, and that when justice is served, it comes to the profit of many. I'd love to hear from you. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. We'll continue talking about this as we move forward after this break. But we'll also talk about what's happened in Egypt as well, with the bombing of the mosque and the 305 now that have lost their lives. And we continue to see the influence of ISIS. And we'll talk about that when we get back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Most residents of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania probably have no idea what their county seal looks like. It has a cow, factories, a silo, an oil lamp set on 2 books, a courthouse, flags and bunting, and more. Recently, a federal district court reluctantly declared the seal unconstitutional because, centered in the background of it all, is a cross. According to the court's opinion, quote, the county has not legally compelled its citizens to practice and conform to Christianity, infringed on freedom of conscience, or created political conflict between the Christian church and other religious sects. Simply put, the county of Lehigh did not intend to establish religion or institute a county religion, unquote. And so the court concluded, quote, Lehigh County's seal is a passive symbol that does not coerce any citizen to practice or adhere to Christianity and does not establish a county religion. Thus, the seal does not violate the plain text of the Establishment Clause, nor does it establish a religion in the way the drafters of the First Amendment imagined. Higher courts, however, have delineated a different mechanism by which the court must determine whether the seal survives constitutional scrutiny. While the court may not fully agree with the test provided, the court must apply that test, unquote. Well, we can only hope an appeal will change that test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Students and teachers are being told that prayer, Bibles, and religion are illegal in public school, but that's not true. Learn the facts. Read your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org right now. Don't let anyone steal your freedom with bad information. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View on this November 27th, 2017 day. My name is Nick Pitts, and I am hosting Point of View today. It's been so great to be back with you all. I've been away out of the Dallas area for the past couple of weeks, was in Israel for 10 days, almost 2 weeks ago, left 2 weeks ago on Sunday. Was there working with one of our partner organizations, the Denison Forum on Truth and Culture, and so was working over there for about 10 days, and then transitioned back to a place that's very similar to Israel, also known as Tennessee. So go to a place that doesn't have a high view of pork to a place that has a very high view of pork in Tennessee, the real type of barbecue. But nevertheless, was there for a couple of days with family and celebrated the Thanksgiving holiday, and then transitioned back over here to Dallas yesterday, flew back in, and is so glad to be back in the seat and back with you all. And so we've been taking your phone calls, so you can be sure to call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212 on this Monday, November 27th, Cyber Monday, day of Point of View. And want to remind you, like we said, you can log on to the website, pointofview.net, to be able to see a rundown of some of the stories that we'll be talking about, as well as go over to our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. In order to, you might be able to see the live cast, though I have to warn you that you'll see me, which is just highly unfortunate. And you can go over and check us out on Facebook as well as on the website and see some of the articles. And I want to direct your attention to what we'll be talking about as well. Some of the things that we'll be discussing is also available on the briefing. I wake up every morning and write this little daily email called the daily briefing. And on the daily briefing, it really just highlights some of the news that's going to be making news for the day and people will be talking about, but doing so from a biblical perspective. Help us to think about through these Nick notes, how am I supposed to interpret this from the biblical perspective? If we believe it to be true that the word is a light to our path and a lamp to our feet, then it's increasingly important for us to see that this living and active word, as the writer of Hebrews 4 says, this living and active word, how we might be able to apply that to the news of the day. You can sign up for the briefing by going to thebriefing.net. Again, that website is www.thebriefing.net to sign up, and you'll be able to see that website, see that newsletter come into your inbox, which is about a 5-minute read every morning. And the first news story that was on the briefing today, as well as which is on our website as well at pointofview.net, is what happened over the weekend, rather on Friday, with the Egypt mosque. That between 25 and 30 militants were waving their Islamic flag, and they were armed with explosives and machine guns and attacked during the Friday prayers at the Al-Rada Mosque. This mosque is known for kind of what's known as the Sufi type of Islam, which is I guess we would compare it from a Christian perspective to a particular denomination of Islam, which has much more of a mysticism bent to it. Well, that doesn't really coalesce with what the Islamic State believes to be true about Islam and about Allah. And thus far, the death toll stands at 305 people. There's over 20 children that passed away during this tragedy. And what we continue to see and prove to be true is that though ISIS continues to lose their land mass and lose their footprint geographically, their influence and their ability to cause tragedy continues to be perpetuated into the future. These are a group of individuals that have just very strong views and very adamant stances relative to allowing the entire world to be able to experience Islam, and they're willing to go to great lengths to show that. Why do they do such kind of these heinous acts? Why do they go about and try to bring about such great tragedy? Well, in their version of Islam, they perform such heinous acts in order that they might act as deterrents, as well as show the world that they're not playing around. What they're wanting to do is to be able to offer up a signal for individuals to be able to see that either subscribe to our view of Islam or be a part of the rest of what you would see, or be a part of some of these tragedies. So in their warped understanding, what they're doing is they're trying to lovingly show you to either convert or be prepared for the worst. And one of the interesting things that continues to come out is ISIS, again, since it was declared, since al-Baghdadi declared it a caliphate in June of 2014, is we're beginning to learn more and more about the inner workings of what's happening with ISIS. ISIS uses what happened just earlier, was reported earlier. ISIS is using Die Hard and Wonder Woman to recruit individuals to join their dwindling ranks. There's some numbers that have them at less than 15,000 people, fighters, today. And so they're using Die Hard and Wonder Woman to recruit individuals from the West to be able to join their ranks. What they're doing in this is they're downplaying the role of religion and asking you and kind of luring you to focus on the hero instead of the cause. The cause of ISIS is this world domination. If we'll remember all the way back in 2014, in that first tragedy, they said that they're going to get to the West and to plant their flag. What they're wanting to do is to have a worldly expression of Islam. Worldly not in the sense of nominal Islam, but worldly in the sense that Islam has encapsulated all 7 billion people in the entire world. It's a particular way of life. And what they're wanting to do, ISIS is driven by that particular cause. It's very apocryphal of what we would say from a revelation standpoint, from a Christian perspective. But what they're doing now, especially since they're dwindling in numbers as well as in their geographic footprint, is they're using these Western movies like Die Hard and Wonder Woman, which place a great emphasis upon individuals instead of a particular cause. And with that, they're focusing on the hero and asking you yourself to be the hero if you join our cause. You don't necessarily have to believe in our cause, but you can be a hero in our cause. And what's interesting and what's tragic is that individuals are increasingly joining their ranks. One of the fascinating characteristics about what ISIS has been able to do is they've been able to utilize social media greatly to be able to convert as well as train what we would know as these lone wolf fighters, whether it be in San Bernardino, to whether it be in Egypt, to whether it happened in London, to Paris. What they're doing is they're able to train and indoctrinate these individuals to carry out some of these heinous acts on these innocent people. But they don't believe them to be innocent, and we'll be talking about that when we come back from the break, that in the ISIS ideology, in their theology, they don't believe this to be innocent acts, but rather these are guilty individuals that they're perpetuating this harm against in their understanding. So though their numbers may be dropping, their focus may be shifting, their fight remains the same, even though they're emphasizing a different part. But just as their numbers are dropping and their focus is shifting, our fight remains the same if you're a Christian. What Paul writes to the Ephesians in Ephesians 6:12, for we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. In the biblical narrative, we're not to hate our enemy, but we're to love our enemy. And one of the key ways that you can love these ISIS enemies is to be able to pray for them. For what stops one of these individuals, like Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who's the leader of ISIS, from becoming what was once a Saul, from becoming and transitioning and converting into a Paul, to be an individual that was one of the greatest harms to the Christian cause? What would happen if our prayers were heard and our prayers were answered to such an extent in the affirmative that al-Baghdadi became a Christian? What force of good could that happen and ripple across the U.S.? I hope you'll join me in praying for these Islamic individuals. One of the beautiful things that's happening right now is there's this revival that's happening in Islam, that there has been more conversions from Islam into Christianity in the past 15 years than in the previous 15 centuries combined. That Aslan is on the move, and we want to join him through our prayers as well as through our actions as well. And so we'll continue to talk about this as well as other topics as well when we get back right after this.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday, there's no end to the ways people are enticing you to spend money. But in the spirit of giving, a reminder that tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. The idea is that amidst the rush to consume, we'll also remember to invest in things that matter. And for Point of View, in line with 2-for-1 specials and BOGO, buy one, get one, we invite you to step up and duet. D-O-E-T. What is that? Donate 1 equals 2. You donate $1 to Point of View Radio, and through a special deal with one of our friends, your dollar becomes 2, your $20 becomes 40, your 50 becomes 100, your 1,000 becomes 2,000. So just duet. Donate 1, which equals 2. And our doors are open now. Click the banner at pointofview.net. or call 1-800-347-5151, or mail your donation before the clock strikes 12 Tuesday night. Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Pointofview.net. Just do it. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back on Point of View. I am Nick Pitts on this November 27th, 2017 day. This is Point of View, and you're listening to the Monday morning edition here in the Dallas area. And we're so glad that you decided to tune in, whether it was over the radio or whether it's on this thing called the internet, which I think is this internet thing is going to catch on, or on Facebook. You could be on Facebook Live right now at www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio, or on our website at pointofview.net. We've been having a great conversation this morning on kind of discouraging to a certain degree with everything that's happening in Washington right now, or what's happening over in Egypt. But before we jump into it, we're going to continue to talk about what's happening in Egypt. We'd love to take your phone calls as well. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. Though you might be taking, you could call in, or you could call in from your landline, or you could call in from your phone line, or kind of call in from your landline, or rather mobile phone. But I have a feeling that some of you are doing some mobile shopping right now. Yesterday, Black Friday was on Friday after Thanksgiving Thursday. And according to some studies that were put out by Adobe Digital Insights, as well as some other Salesforce, they said that over 42% of Black Friday sales were on your mobile phone. So according to the Carly Rae Jepsons of the world, to call me maybe not so much, because you're trying to do some Black Friday shopping as well as Cyber Monday shopping that could be happening right now. But I want to encourage you as well to prepare for what's coming on Tuesday. Not only is Kirby Anderson going to be back in studio and back in the host chair, but also Tuesday has been designated as Giving Tuesday. It's that time in which you can give to nonprofit organizations or other organizations that are doing good work in our great land today. And I know I am completely biased right now, just like I'm biased against pork barbecue, just like I'm biased against my Vanderbilt Commodores, just like I'm biased against sweet tea. I am biased towards nonprofit organizations, and one of those organizations just happens to be Point of View, from which I'm hosting right now. In a fake news era, Point of View is increasingly necessary, not only to help you better understand what is the news, but to help understand what is the biblical perspective on that news. To being thoughtful and considerate, not rushing to judgment, but heeding God's invitation, it says in Isaiah 1:18, to come and let us reason together. To recognize the truth of what John Milton says in Paradise Lost. Let her being truth and falsehood, grapple in a field, for I've never known truth to be put asunder. One of the great things about what we do here at Point of View that differentiates us from the rest is we really do have thoughtful conversations about some of the issues of the day, not being quick to rush to judgment, but considering both sides of the perspective, because after all, there are two sides to every story. And what we want to do is hopefully be able to accurately portray and comment on both sides of the story, but do so in a gracious manner, recognizing the truth of what Paul said to the Ephesians, to speak the truth in love. And one of the beautiful things about love is always looking for the best and seeking to redeem the worst. And so we want to be loving in all our responses, because after all, what does Jesus tell us in John 13? But rather we're to be known for our love. This love was sacrificial, as Jesus demonstrated on the cross, and this love is also generous, as Jesus demonstrated through giving us eternal life simply by saying yes to him. So even though Prince Harry is now engaged and has now made one woman into royalty with a simple yes, we have the opportunity, as well as with a simple yes, to become royalty and then to follow after Jesus as well, because he has adopted us as sons and daughters of the King. And so all of that to say, we would highly encourage you to be able to give to Point of View. And that can happen if you go onto the website at www.pointofview.net. You can go onto the Facebook page as well and find out more information at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Or you can call in as well. You can call in at 800-351-1212, and we'll have individuals that will be willing to take your call and handle that. And so we say thank you so much in advance for what God is going to do through you and through your generous gift as well. And so as we've been talking about on the news, there's just some discouraging things that are happening out of Washington, as well as continue to happen across the world. In the first hour, we talked about the Nancy Pelosi's response to John Conyers. John Conyers has now decided that he is going to step aside as the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. John Conyers was the individual. He was the Michigan Democrat that has been accused, as well as had payouts and settlements relative to some sexual allegations and accusations that have been leveled against him from, I believe, about 5 years ago, that taxpayers funded the silencing of these women in these settlements to the tune of about $25,000 to $30,000. So they may be accusations, but they're buttressed and they're validated by the money that taxpayers are funding towards that. And Nancy Pelosi went on Meet the Press yesterday with Chuck Todd and called Conyers an icon of this of the House institution. He said that he's been a great protector of women, and she called for due process. And yes, due process does need to be done, but to a certain extent, is the allegations not already true because you were willing to pay out that money to be able to settle that suit? And not only is it limited, it's not limited just to the Democratic side, but we're continuing to see it also on the Democratic side with Al Franken and some of the accusations that have been leveled against him, but also with Roy Moore as well. Roy Moore is the senatorial candidate out of Alabama right now, and the accusations continue to pile up. That started from the Washington Post story upwards of a month ago, where three underage girls, one 18-year-old, three underage, 14, 15, 17, and then the 18-year-old said that Moore initiated certain relationships with them. And this is an individual that now Alabama voters have the chance to be able to put into office or to be able to kick out of the public square. One of the fascinating takes based on the latest poll is that Moore, despite all of these accusations that are mounting up against him, still continues to lead this race. Based on polling, he's leading by upwards of 4 percentage points right now, which is outside the margin of error in that particular poll. So how are we to think about this from a Christian perspective? Well, we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your comments at 800-351-1212. You've heard from me. I'm just pretty fed up with some of this behavior that's by these individuals that are being lauded as examples in our culture today. There's the sense that we want to be supportive and not necessarily antagonistic towards every motive and every position and every politician. But when we hear about such acts, we need to recognize the truth that faithful are the wounds of a friend. In Proverbs, from Proverbs 27:16, we need to recognize the truth that righteousness exalts a nation, and these accusations are anything but righteous, but rather the righteousness falls upon those that are standing on the outside that are willing to say that thanks but no thanks, and that we don't need this type of behavior in these institutions that are leading us. But again, that's just one perspective. That's me. I'm the millennial. I'm the selfie-taking, Uber-riding, student debt-accumulating millennial that just happens to host Point of View on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we'd love to hear from you as well. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Be sure to call in and offer your comment, because after the break, we'll talk about this if we get a phone call, but what I really want to talk about is what's happening in Egypt right now. ISIS again attacked an Egyptian mosque, and 305 people have lost their lives. But I thought ISIS had lost their footprint. I thought ISIS was done. Well, they don't appear to be done as well. We're going to talk more about ISIS and other events that are happening in Egypt when we get back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
The tax bill making its way through Congress may be a slight improvement over the existing tax code, but just barely. Columnist George Will reminds us that the best solution would be to repeal and replace the tax code. There is a bill in Congress that would actually do that, but it won't ever get an up or down vote. The Tax Code Termination Act would delete the 4 million word code as of December 31st, 2021, and require that Congress replace it with a new one by July 4th of that year. George Will says that it could just as easily be called the Mitch Daniels Act. Daniels was the head of Office of Management and Budget who wished the tax code looked as though it had been designed on purpose. One statement by George Will in his column got my attention. He says that 62% of American households pay more in payroll taxes than in income taxes. He also added that 45% of American households pay no income tax. That's when I decided to dig into the numbers provided by the Tax Policy Center. Nearly 36% pay more in payroll taxes than income taxes, and an additional 26% pay no income taxes but do pay payroll taxes for a total of 62%, cited by George Will. When you add the 18% who pay neither income taxes nor payroll taxes to the 26% who pay payroll taxes but no income taxes, you get the total of 45% of American households who pay no income tax. The tax reform bill would double the standard deduction to $12,000 for individuals and $24,000 for married couples. This change will increase the number of people who will not have to pay any income taxes. That will make it even harder to get tax simplification because fewer Americans will be affected by the tax code. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts on this November 27th, 2017 day, also known as Cyber Monday. We have been talking about everything from what's happening in Congress right now to we're going to switch and transition over what's happening in Egypt right now. So if you weren't aware, on Friday, between 25 and 30 militants waving the Islamic State flag armed with explosives and machine guns attacked during Friday prayers at the Al-Radi Mosque in Egypt. Thus far, the death toll stands at 305, with approximately 20 to 25 children. Estimates indicate children that have lost their lives. And when many read this story, there was just the kind of the pushback as to I thought ISIS was defeated. I thought we continued to shrink their footprint in Raqqa as well as in other areas. But what we're continuing to see is that ISIS, though it has established a caliphate back in June of 2014, because there was the caliph, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, that the kind of the leader, I guess you could say, of the ISIS movement. Though they've lost their land, they continue to have this particular influence. Their numbers are appearing to drop and to dwindle. Their focus is shifting, but the fight continues to remain the same. One of the interesting things of what ISIS is doing is we're starting to hear more and more reports as they're losing some of their tight hand as to their tactics and their strategies. ISIS is using Die Hard and Wonder Woman to recruit individuals to join their dwindling ranks. They're using these individuals because if you've ever watched Die Hard or Wonder Woman, it really does center upon a person instead of a cause. What they're doing is they're downplaying the role of religion and the cause of ISIS, which is, again, having a worldwide expression and manifestation of Islam across the entire world. But they're really wanting individuals to come in and to recruit, to join in the cause but they're accentuating the fact that you too can be a hero if you join us. What's so fascinating is that ISIS is, again, we're starting to see some type of success with this. To give us a scope and scale, according to the Pentagon, a year ago, ISIS was averaging roughly 2,000 new foreign fighters a month. 2,000. That number has dropped today to around 200 new fighters. ISIS is believed to have rallied upwards of 30,000 foreign fighters from more than 100 countries to its cause. That number has reportedly fallen to as low as 19,000 based on our latest estimates. Approximately 1 in 5 suicide bombers that ISIS has is a child, someone under the age of 18. The battle is coming to an end, but the rebuilding season and this new season with ISIS continues to expand and continues to surprise us, to shock us, and to sadden us, because they are offering and they're doing such things as just horrific acts. And they're largely being supplied, and financially they're seeing their motivation continuing to move forward because they have such a strong financial backing as well, primarily because of kidnapping ransoms as well as oil money. There was a time when they were taking in about $1 million per day because of extortion and taxation. That if you're in the ISIS area, if you're in the geographic footprint of ISIS, there's a certain taxes, because Islam, under their form of Islam, it's more than simply just a religion like we might have on a Sunday or on a Wednesday, but rather it's a way of life. And so there's a taxation in order to buttress the ISIS infrastructure and the ISIS structure. Salaries take up about 50% of this, adding up to at least $300 million a year, but they have contracts and revenues that they taxed up to 20%. They're making $20 million per year off of kidnapping and ransoms. By year's end in 2016, ISIS controlled more than $2 trillion in assets and had $2.9 billion in annual income. Again, their two main sources of revenue are oils and taxes. Now, 2017 has brought about great shifts in ISIS. They've lost their footprint. There's been leadership shakeups because of deaths that have happened, but we continue to see them move forward. And the way that they're moving forward is they're employing some of these recruitment strategies that's really becoming successful to recruit some of these lone wolf fighters to fight in areas like San Bernardino, to fight in areas like Paris, to fight in areas like England as well. And by fighting, I mean fighting to the death, and not only the death of the individual fighter, but also to innocent bystanders as well. So what scope and scale wise, what we're continuing to see is that they're expanding outside of Iraq and Syria. They're really stretching across the world. But one of the other footprints that they have, and they have a significant influence, is in the Philippines right now. They took over a Philippine city in the southern Philippines, and the government had to declare martial law all the way back on May 24th. One of the things that we're continuing to see is that ISIS is shifting outside of a land-based geographic model and is moving towards a troublemaker, someone that's willing to cause disturbances in order to what they would consider to awaken you to the claims of ISIS. Well, this has always been the case, right? With Islam, this type of radical Islam. So radical Islam, we're seeing ISIS is shrinking, and the numbers are around 19,000 according to the latest Pentagon estimates. But what we know about ISIS is that it subscribes to what's known as radical Islam. Now it's very important for us to distinguish. Not every Muslim is a radical Muslim. There's a distinction that must be made, a differentiation. And according to Gallup polls, that differentiation is it's a small number, but it's also a sizable number that we might say. Across the world, the world religion estimates have it at 1.7 billion Muslims in that world. But of the 1.7 billion Muslims in that world, only 7% believe what's known as the extremist claims. Some of those extremist claims of that 7%. So if you're doing the math right now, that's around 119 million individuals that have subscribed to this radical extremist version of Islam. This radical extremist version of Islam, that of that 119 million people, Gallup, according to that same survey that they took back in 2014, of those 119 million, 50% of them would be willing to die for the cause of Islam. That's 58 million. If that number is 10 times too many, that's 5 million people that are willing to be suicide bombers for the cause of this radical Islam. But one of the fascinating things that continues to take place is these are individuals that are not only diehard, but they're also willing to go above and beyond in order that they can recruit other individuals, as well as is really subscribing to the belief that this is for their good. In their warped understanding, they would say that these acts of horror should be detriments to those that don't subscribe to their version of Islam, because what they're wanting to say is you don't need to, you might be afraid of this, but you can join this as well so that you might not be a part of it. We're becoming more violent in our expressions in order to act as a deterrent to you. They're saying that this is a part of the goodness of what we're doing. It might be detrimentally hurting, and it might be horrific to the people that are involved that lose their life. But this is a sympathetic way for us to show you that you can either join us or continue to be against us and be counted among those that have lost their lives. I would love to hear from you. What do you think about the ISIS threat? Are we, as Americans, are we responding in a prudent manner? Are we doing everything that we can do? What can we do as Americans? What can we do as Christians as well? We'd love to hear from you. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. When we get back after the break, we're going to continue to be talking about some of this. Not only are we going to talk about some of the modern day manifestations as we see have played out, and again, San Bernardino, in Paris, in England, and now in Egypt, but we're going to continue to talk about the historical implications for this. Why are these individuals motivated? How are they individuals motivated? Is this in the Quran, in their holy book? Well, we'll find out more about that when we come back from the break. But we'll also find out more about what differentiates someone that's a Muslim from a radical Muslim. What causes individuals to want to fly planes into buildings? Does every Muslim want to fly planes into buildings? Well, we know that's not the case, because many of us, as the increasing number of Muslims begin to be converted into America, we know good Muslims that are our neighbors, that are good people, that are working for the good of their city. And so it's important for us to be able to distinguish Muslims from radicalized extremist Muslims as well. And then from the Christian perspective, how are we to begin to think about this? When Jesus tells us to turn the other cheek, when Jesus tells us to be able to take the soldier's pack and carry it for an extra mile, does that mean we're supposed to carry these packs? Does that mean we're supposed to turn the other cheek to these individuals? Isn't there a call to arms to be able to protect us? As what Paul would say in 1 Timothy, to be able to protect and provide for the family that God has blessed us with and granted us with? I think these are all valid questions, and that it will work through when we get back after the break. And we'd love to hear from you as well. The phone lines are open if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to offer. That number is 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And when we get back, we're gonna kind of channel what Winston Churchill said, that the further I look back into the past, the more clearly I can see into the future. To look back into the past of Islam and to see where the future might be taking us. When we get back right after this.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday, there's no end to the ways people are enticing you to spend money. But in the spirit of giving, a reminder that tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. The idea is that amidst the rush to consume, we'll also remember to invest in things that matter. And for Point of View, in line with 2-for-1 specials and BOGO, buy one, get one, we invite you to step up and duet. D-O-E-T. What is that? Donate 1 equals 2. You donate $1 to Point of View Radio, and through a special deal with one of our friends, your dollar becomes 2, your $20 becomes 40, your 50 becomes 100, your 1,000 becomes 2,000. So just duet. Donate 1, which equals 2. And our doors are open now. Click the banner at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151 or mail your donation before the clock strikes 12 Tuesday night. Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Pointofview.net. Just do it. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this November 27th, 2017, Cyber Monday day. I'm wondering how many listeners have actually already purchased something on Cyber Monday. I know I have. I had to get my mom a present. I think it's always important for us to make sure that we're getting our parents and our loved ones present. And so I feel like I'm above the grade right now. I mean, it's not even December and I've already gotten her gift out of the way. And I'm so grateful for that. And hopefully that you're starting to make your way through your Christmas list as well on this Cyber Monday day, that you've spent through Black Friday and Silly Saturday and Sabbath Sunday and Cyber Monday. I'm making these up as I go. But nevertheless, we want to thank you so much for tuning in. Some of you might be tuning in on our Facebook through Facebook Live right now at www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Some of you are listening in on pointofview.net through the podcast. And there are others of you that are listening in live right now on KBDT, which is the call letters for the show that we're listening in here in the Dallas market. And just so you know, for those that are listening in on KBDT, the callers at 11:60 a.m., just so you know, this is the only time live that you'll be hearing the program. And so this is a unique opportunity for you to be able to call in and live, because all the other programs that you'll hear throughout the week, simply on KBDT 1160, you'll hear a taped program. But it's only on Monday morning that you hear a live program. So you can be sure to call in, and that number is 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. We've been talking about everything from what's happening in Washington to now we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what's happening in Egypt right now with the tragedy that happened during Friday prayers in Egypt at the mosque. And with this mosque was known that 305 people lost their lives. Upwards of 20 to 25 children lost their life in this tragedy by these Islamic extremists, specifically individuals that were waving the Islamic State flag and carrying machine guns as well as the flag into this mosque. Is that they walked into, this was a particular type of this, what we would consider in the Christian tradition, a particular denomination of Islam that is described and used the moniker Sufis. And they've been described in the past as tolerant and pluralistic to a certain degree. Now, this isn't saying that this, but I want you to understand this. When we use these words, we're not presupposing that non-Sufi Muslims aren't tolerant or pluralistic, but rather this is characteristics that have been accentuated by Sufis of this particular mosque that the Islamic extremists have decided to attack. And this particular brand of Islam has been known as kind of tolerant, pluralistic, and also another word that's been used is mystic. There was a fascinating article on the Atlantic by Shahid Hamid that really does a great job of giving a treatment to these Sufi Muslims. And it also highlights a very accentuating point that I think is important for us to be able to realize, is that these Islamic extremists are attacking Muslims much more than they're attacking non-Muslims. That according to some estimates, that there are, for every Christian that's killed by Islamic extremists, 10 Muslims are killed. Some even have that number at 20 Muslims. So that's a 20-to-1 ratio right now that they're enacting harm. Well, why is that? Because they believe it to be true that they're wanting to usher in this new era of Islam that really does allow the entire world to be able to operate under this brand of religion. You see, this started all the way back in 610 when Muhammad received his vision. What's known, this experience is often called the Night of Power and Excellence, when he went up during the month of Ramadan, the 9th month on the Arab calendar, on the 17th day of the month. He had a vision of the Archangel Gabriel that tells him to write down these things, that the Jewish version of God was aired, the Christian version of God aired, and now this Islamic vision of God is correct. And he begins in 610 to write down particular verses and what would later become known as the Quran. And so these are the peaceful verses that are a part of this 610 era. In Surah 2:256, it says, "Let there be no compulsion in religion." In 109:6, it says, "To you be your way and to me mine." And there's in this first iteration, this first season of Islam is a very peaceful, submissive religion. It's very much characterized by peace. But in 622, Muhammad makes his move to Yathrib, also known as Medina. It was renamed Medina, which means city of the prophet. And when they make this move to Medina, what we see then is there begins to be a level of aggression that happens in Islam, and this is manifested in the Quran, which are known as what we'll continue to see as the early Medina verses, is what it's known in Islamic literature. And so, for example, in Surah 2:190, it says, "Fight in the cause of God those who fight you, but do not transgress limits. For God loveth not transgressors. But if they cease, God is often most forgiving, most merciful." We see a level of aggression begin to perk up within Muhammad's writings. From let you be your way, let me be my way, let there be no compulsion in religion in 610. By 622, we see this level of aggression in the early Medina verses that only intensifies when Muhammad's at the end of his life. Muhammad's life would end at 632, but in 631 to 632, we're continuing to see this level of aggression now that many Islamic extremists believe to be binding and true. The Surah 9, Surah being the chapter in Arab, Surah 9 says, "Fight and slay the pagans wherever ye find them. Fight those who believe not in God." So what we see at the end of Muhammad's life is he's moving to this new city, wanting to continue to build this legacy and wanting to make sure that Islam survives past him, as he's saying in this new city to this small band of followers, anyone that doesn't believe in what we believe, you are to fight and slay them wherever you would find them. And so that moves us into the current controversy within Islam, the Islamic community right now, which is known as the doctrine of abrogation. Does the former interpret the latter? Does the latter interpret the former? Do they believe it to be true that the latest words are the most binding words to fight and slay the pagans? Or the earliest words, the most binding words, that to let there be no compulsion in religion, let you be your way and my be my way, which is the binding? We face this as well within Christianity, right? Are we supposed to kill Canaanites right now because God called the Joshua and the Israelites to kill Canaanites in Joshua? Or are we supposed to subscribe to the new letter of the law that Jesus offered us in John 13 as well as in Galatians? To I've given you a new law, to love your neighbor as yourself, to love your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength is what it says in Matthew 22, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. In Christianity, the latter interprets the former. In Islam, 93% of Muslims would say that the earliest, and you should interpret the latter in light of the former, that there be no compulsion in religion, to be submissive, to move forward the movement of peace. But then you have 7% that would say that the latter interprets the former. And so what you see here is they're moving away from simply a 5 pillars, which any Muslim is going to believe, to adding 2 additional pillars to Islam. You see, any Muslim is going to believe the 5 pillars of life that are supposed to be a part of your life. The first being the witness that there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is Allah's messenger. Every Muslim is going to say this to become a Muslim. They want this to be the first words on their mouth in the morning and the last words at night. There's the prayer, the 5 times a day they're going to be praying. There's the almsgiving of giving 2.5% of one's income to the poor. There's fasting during the month of Ramadan, fasting from dawn to sunset during that time. And then there's the pilgrimage to at least go once to Mecca. And if you can't go, then to financially support an individual that goes. Those are very peaceful pillars. Those are very, very ritualistic and peaceful practices for a Muslim. But then if you're an extremist, what you do is you add an additional 2 tenets, 2 pillars to those 5, which gives it some of this aggressiveness, gives it some of this level of violence that we'll continue to see that brings tragedy onto this. Jim Dennison's done great work in this, and I'd highly encourage you to go to his website at denisonforum.org to be able to find out more information. But when we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to expound upon what are those 2 additional pillars that really do differentiate the individual that has this level of aggression, this 7%. What causes these individuals to walk into this innocent room of individuals that are worshiping God, worshiping Allah, and causes them to wreak havoc and tragedy upon these people? what gives them the justification to say that these aren't innocent people, but these are guilty bystanders, and it's our God justified by belief in God in order that we might be able to bring horror and tragedy and to end their life? What causes this rationale behind it? And we're going to talk about that once we get back from the break. But also, just so you know, you can call in as well. That number is 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. We want to interrupt your Cyber Monday shopping on your phone because 42% of you, according to statistics, are shopping right now on your phone. And be sure to call in to Point of View, especially if you're on that 1160 a.m. call number. So we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Most residents of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania probably have no idea what their county seal looks like. It has a cow, factories, a silo, an oil lamp set on 2 books, a courthouse, flags and bunting, and more. Recently, a federal district court reluctantly declared the seal unconstitutional because, centered in the background of it all, is a cross. According to the court's opinion, quote, the county has not legally compelled its citizens to practice and conform to Christianity, infringed on freedom of conscience, or created political conflict between the Christian church and other religious sects. Simply put, the county of Lehigh did not intend to establish religion or institute a county religion, unquote. And so the court concluded, quote, Lehigh County's seal is a passive symbol that does not coerce any citizen to practice or adhere to Christianity and does not establish a county religion. Thus, the seal does not violate the plain text of the Establishment Clause, nor does it establish a religion in the way the drafters of the First Amendment imagined. Higher courts, however, have delineated a different mechanism by which the court must determine whether the seal survives constitutional scrutiny. While the court may not fully agree with the test provided, the court must apply that test, unquote. Well, we can only hope an appeal will change that test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Students and teachers are being told that prayer, Bibles, and religion are illegal in public school, but that's not true. Learn the facts. Read your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org right now. Don't let anyone steal your freedom with bad information. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View for this last 9-minute segment before you're ushered off, and we're ushered off into the place. And so we are so thankful that you decided to join us on this Cyber Monday, November 27th, 2017. And we want to continue to encourage you can call in, and you can check us out on our website as well as on the Facebook page. The website is www.pointofview.net, the Facebook page, which I think some people are on Facebook right now. I'm looking right now. I think there are a couple of people that are on Facebook. I think the number right now is at 2 billion. You can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And so I also want to encourage you that today is Cyber Monday, and if statistics prove to be true, 42% of you will be on your mobile phone doing shopping on Cyber Monday. that many of you, the average American, spend $122 on Black Friday, and you'll be spending more money on Cyber Monday, some estimate. But then there's Giving Tuesday, and I want to again encourage you that we would gladly welcome your gifts. Now, I know that I'm highly biased and about that, but we would gladly welcome your gifts, and you can feel free to give online at pointofview.net, as well as to call in at 800-351-1212 to be able to offer up a charitable donation for us at the end of the year. We would be very grateful for you during that. Being in this fake news era, you're looking for a trusted news source and individuals to be able to offer up a particular vantage point from a Christian perspective, but also just from a considerate and thoughtful perspective as well. And so we would welcome those gifts as well. And so for this last little segment, we've been talking about Islam, and we've been talking about the ISIS attack, or the supposed ISIS attack in Egypt that claimed the lives of 305 people in this Al-Radi mosque. And so what causes an individual to be able to do such a heinous act? We look at the 5 pillars of Islam, which every good Muslim would observe and would practice. Those 5 pillars, as outlined in the Quran, are the individual would say the witness, that there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is God's messenger, that every Muslim declares this aloud at least once in his life, slowly and with deep meaning. Many Muslims repeat this repeatedly throughout the day. There's the witness. There's also the prayers, praying 5 times a day. There's the almsgiving, of giving 2.5% of your income to the poor. There's fasting. You're fasting during the month of Ramadan from sunrise all the way to sunset. There's no eating or drinking. There's not even spitting. The individuals would spit so that they wouldn't have to drink some of their spit, rather. And then there's also the pilgrimage, which is the Hajj, the Mecca, at least once, that you would go to Mecca on this pilgrimage. And if you can't go, that you would financially support someone to go. Now, looking at those 5 pillars, you wouldn't see any impetus. You wouldn't see any motivation to cause such harsh crimes. You wouldn't see such impetus to cause the death. There's no warrant for death upon individuals to cause such violence. So what does that? Well, again, we talked about the doctrine of abrogation, of interpreting the latter in light of the former in light of the latter. And what we see with radical Islamists, they use the sword verses, again, towards the latter end of Muhammad's life, from 631 to 632. They use those verses to have 2 additional pillars onto Islam. And the first being this: they believe that the West has been attacking the Muslim community since the Crusades, dating back to 1095 to the late 13th century. What we see is the Crusades were that Christians were attacking Muslims, were attacking specifically in Islam what's known as the Ummah, which is the global community of Muslims. They've been attacking them. An attack against the Ummah, the global community, at one point in time is attack against the Ummah at all points in time. That we wouldn't say it's not just once in a particular time you attacked them, but rather you attacked us during that time. So you see that the first pillar is that they believe that the West has been attacking Muslims since the Crusades. And so with that, we also see that there's a second pillar to that. Because the West has been attacking Muslims since the Crusades, the second pillar is they claim that there's no innocent victims in the West. That the creation of the State of Israel in 1948 was a rightful theft of land, that when there are American troops on Saudi soil or on Iraq and Afghanistan soil, again, that's attacking the Ummah. And because of that, because of the West, specifically the U.S., we're in a democratic system. We openly and freely participate to support this democracy. We are not innocent anymore. There is, quote, blood on our hands. And so they claim there is no innocent victims in the West. This tenet most distinguishes radical Muslims from the larger world. Since we're since we're democracies, we freely elect our leaders and our individuals. We support our military. The jihadists view us like we viewed Germans who supported Hitler, Japanese citizens who supported the emperor in World War II. 9/11 was an unprovoked attack, but rather 9/11 was an attack upon the systems by which we support our individuals. And so that there's this justification. And so again, to remind you that this isn't every Muslim that believes that. This is just radical extremist Muslims. And according to a Gallup poll in 2014, of all 1.7 billion Muslims in the world today, 7%, so upward around approximately 119 million Muslims believe those 2 tenets. And of that 119 million, that 50% said they would be willing to die for their faith. They would be suicide bombers. Now, I think it's important for us to distinguish that 7% number is going to be a much higher percentage in Yemen, in Syria, than it is going to be here in the U.S. That if you're like me, I was in a fraternity in college, and I had a couple of brothers in my fraternity that were Muslim. One that had a Sunni mother and a Shiite father. But this was an individual that was not radical, wasn't extremist, but rather was the most polite individual that I knew. He was always the top of his class, was well-spoken, went above and beyond to serve not only the fraternity, but also the larger university campus as a whole. He was a very upstanding member of the university community. He was a good Muslim. But we also recognize the truth that there are individuals that subscribe to this radical Muslim, this extremist tendencies, and because of that, they're very much more antagonistic towards the West. They're very much seeing this as an attack against, they're attacking the Ummah, which is the global community of Muslims. And because of Surah 9, that's justification to attack, to what it says in Surah 9, to fight and slay the pagans wherever you may find them. So what are we supposed to do as Christians? Well, I think it's important for us to defend ourselves, right? Based upon 1 Timothy 5, we recognize the truth that we are to defend ourselves and to provide for our families. So we need to be on the defensive. But we also recognize the truth that what G.K. Chesterton said, I think is so true today. That what G.K. Chesterton says, that the true soldier fights not because he hates who's in front of him, but because he loves who's behind him. That we recognize that hate has a shelf life, and that shelf life is very limited in nature. That there's only a certain amount of time that hate can last. That what Martin Luther King said, that hate is too great a burden to bear, for I've chosen to love. We know that this love was what caused Jesus to cry drops of blood in the garden in Luke 22, but then in Hebrews 12 was willing to cause him to be able to go to the cross for joy, it says in Hebrews 12 too. That he went from crying drops of blood, not my will, but your will be done in Luke 22, that when he went to the cross, just a day later, he went for joy before him. Why? Because he was doing the work that the Father set out before him, according to John 17. That we recognize that love has this propensity, love has this power to be able to make us do extraordinary things. That it's this love that it says in 2 Corinthians 5:14 that compels Paul. It's this love that was able to have this resurrected resolve that just as the individuals killed Jesus, as he handed over his life, was able to be resurrected 3 days later. That we're called to love individuals. And what we recognize the truth about what happens at the resurrection is that our love may not have fruit in the immediacy of the moment, but we recognize the truth that love never fails, that love always wins. Depositing acts and kind words of love have the propensity to stir in hearts an opportunity to reap a harvest of the gospel. That we're to love in spite of all the hate in this world today, and recognize the truth that our God is faithful and he's just. And this has been Point of View, and we'll see you next time.
Black Friday, Cyber Monday, there's no end to the ways people are enticing you to spend money. But in the spirit of giving, a reminder that tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. The idea is that amidst the rush to consume, we'll also remember to invest in things that matter. And for Point of View, in line with 2-for-1 specials and BOGO, buy one, get one, we invite you to step up and duet. D-O-E-T. What is that? Donate 1 equals 2. You donate $1 to Point of View Radio, and through a special deal with one of our friends, your dollar becomes 2, your $20 becomes 40, your 50 becomes 100, your 1,000 becomes 2,000. So just duet. Donate 1, which equals 2. And our doors are open now. Click the banner at pointofview.net. Or call 1-800-347-5151. Or mail your donation before the clock strikes 12 Tuesday night. Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Pointofview.net. Just do it.